Are you looking for some striking graphics to promote your next business idea? Use Lauren as we do for all your graphical needs. You can contact her on Twitter at LOZUNNIE. We use her for all of our graphics here at the Business and Games Podcast. Welcome to episode 003 of Business in Games, also known as the Big Podcast. I'm your host, Chris May-Smith. In this show, we chat about anything gaming and technology, tackling the big and small business topics. Today I have with us Campbell Simpson, who's had 10 years in the gig writing about technology, and as of the past 3 years, he's been at Gizmodo, currently holding the title of Australia's editor. Cam, how are you today, mate?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, fairly decent. It's gotten a bit cold here in Melbourne, actually. All of a sudden, the temperature's gone quite down, but you know, I've seen on social media that you've been hiking through the mountain ranges of New South Wales recently, so I assume the weather's a little bit better up north?
You know what? It is a cracking day up here. It's actually really, really nice. Yeah, just went for a hike today and having a relaxing afternoon.
Are you telling me that technology computer people do actually go outside?
You know what? It's rare, but when we do, we make the most of it. We take a whole bunch of selfies, we stick them on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. We make the world realise that we're out there.
You know, I think they really need to release one of those delayed status update things for your personal Facebook. I know that company pages you can establish it so Facebook posts can happen at a certain date and time. So maybe that one time I go outside next, I can just queue up about 90 selfies to post so people actually think that I'm walking around out in the sun.
See, I figure you go out somewhere, you do a really long walk, you take a whole bunch of photos along the way at a bunch of different places. And then, you know, over the next 6 weeks, you're set. You're just like every single day I'm in a different place.
You've got this planned out a little bit too much, I think.
Yeah, I promise I didn't have this already organised.
So I mentioned that you're currently holding the title as the Gizmodo Australia editor. We chatted a bit off mic, and people have seen on Twitter a lot too that you've previously done a lot of freelance work as well. One of the questions that I guess comes to mind straight away is the difference between being a freelancer and working in something like you do, say in a wage job. How would you say that your daily writing tasks have changed from, when you've been a freelancer over PC World Magazine and PC Tech Authority and a bunch of different tech publications compared to, working a full-time wage job as you are currently?
So the big difference between freelancing and working full-time is that when you're freelancing, you set your own agenda. You can decide when you wake up, when you do the work that you have assigned, when you pitch for new stories that you want to write. When you're working full-time, you have that pressure placed on you by someone else, so I have KPIs to hit, I have a website to run and people to manage. That's that comes with the job that I do. Whereas when I was freelancing, it's entirely up to you how much effort you put in versus, the reward that you get back out of it.
Yeah. And I guess that brings me to think about, the kind of freelancing that I did in the past working with Tweaktown, a mainly US based publication. And it was very different, right? And we've chatted a bit about this previously, that there's a few different types of freelancing where, from what I understand, your freelancing was more so you're not hired specifically by an agency or by any one company, and you pitch your stories towards different companies, or the company will come to you and say, hey, we want to do, say, a motherboard roundup, and you'll do that. Compared to my freelancing, for example, where I was technically freelancing, but I was only doing it for one website and I was covering certain different topics. Would you agree with that analysis?
Yeah, so when I was freelancing, it was, I was putting myself out there and pitching stories and reviews to, half a dozen different tech publications at the same time, and there were always those, those go-tos, there'd be those half a dozen that I would know would be commissioning stories, that I have good relationships with the editors and sort of know what they were looking for, and their wishes lined up with the work that I was able to do and the kind of stuff that I enjoyed doing. So, I had a stable of solid relationships with those publishers, but at the same time, I didn't have the security of working at one place, with a guaranteed income and guaranteed workload every month.
Yeah, and I guess expanding on that fact of, being, I guess, what I call a waged job with having that kind of possible extra security compared to, being the freelancer where you have to make sure that you hit your personal target for money in each month and things like that. Do you find that the pressure is more so having to, be the editor and run the website? Because I do know that Allure Media likes to keep, quite a slim amount of writers. So would you say that the pressure is more so or less so being a waged writer, or is it just a different kind of pressure compared to freelance?
Look, it's a different kind of pressure. Like, obviously, in any kind of job and in any kind of writing job, the pressure is what you place on yourself. I would say when I was freelancing, I had quite fat months and quite lean months. And, on those fat months at the end of the month, you'd be like, yeah, I've done enough work. I'm just going to take the rest of the week off. I've made my money for the month. Working a wage job and, working at Gizmodo as I do as editor, I have those different responsibilities. I have to interact with the US team. I have to manage my team, and I have to do all of that at the same time as actually producing work and, still working as a writer. Of course, that's primarily the main job that I have. And it's instead of having sort of one task to complete as a freelancer, like delivering on work that has been commissioned or finding new work, working as a waged editor, I have a bunch of different pressures sort of vying for my attention, and it's balancing all of those that is sort of the main day-to-day for me.
Yeah, and I guess you have, the added responsibility, right? Because you're the editor. For those who don't know, the editor is more so than just, say, editing other people's work, or it's more so than just being the more senior person who writes stuff. So could you expand a bit more on, say, how the editor would work compared to someone who works underneath you? For example, say Ray Johnson, who does some writing at Gizmodo as well.
Yeah, so Ray is my news writer. So she's the journalist at Gizmodo, and I'm the editor. But editor doesn't sort of. We have such a flat structure that, I'm not editing Ray's work, for example. She publishes straight to the website, just like I publish straight to the website. My role, that extra responsibility that it involves is, steering the editorial direction of the site, saying, these are the topics of the day, of the week, of the month. These are the things that we're going to cover. These are the events that we want to be reporting from, or these are the sort of technology topics that we want to be paying attention to. And, my management of my staff, I've got Ray, my journalist, and we've got Haley, our social media editor, and Amanda, who is our early morning sub editor. So she takes care of a lot of the US refeed and covers any breaking news that might happen between sort of 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. My extra responsibility with those guys is and I give them I have the fantastic ability. Well, I have the fantastic team that they don't require really any management. Everyone's so autonomous. My responsibility is basically just sort of guiding them through, these are the tech topics that you should be educating yourself on and paying attention to. And then, from there, I'm able to leave it up to them to actually, do their day-to-day jobs and get that stuff done.
Yeah, and you mentioned about, having an early morning sub-editor and having different editors who are, really based around different topics and things like that, and you having to control that, balancing the scales. Touching on that topic a bit more, with tech being 24/7, as I do and a lot of other people do, most press releases are US time based, which is, anywhere between midnight and 6 a.m. for us. And, for example, I work at Corsair and all of our press releases are 6 a.m. PST, which daylight savings or not figures out to be about midnight. Do you find it's hard for you to relax, being the editor and controlling this kind of stuff? And obviously writing yourself, you always have to be in touch with technology. And that's actually a question asked on Twitter by @JamesCroft.
Yeah, so because, technology is 24/7 these days, we're part of a publication that spans the world. We've got, websites that operate out of the US and UK and Japan and India and, a whole bunch of other places like that. So we have, our regional outposts that cover news in different time zones. But at the same time, we want to pay attention to everything from an Australian perspective 24/7. And that means, that we cover major technology events. So, it might be an Apple launch or a Samsung launch that might happen, 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. Australian time. That we still have to, have our input on that and, add our own editorializing and our own voice to that for the readers that expect that from Gizmodo Australia. So, it does mean that there's extra time pressure outside of, just the regular 9 to 5. My job is very much not a 9 to 5 one. The majority of what I do is in the daytime, in the Australian daytime. But there's a lot of, outside of work hours, events that I might be attending in the evening or the morning, and, news that I'm covering that, happens, more often than not in the US time zone. So, I have to live partially in a US time zone.
And part of that, do you find that there's an issue, maybe getting into a flow with your job? Do you find that disruptive flow is something that's actually, I guess, disruptive to what you do? Or do you find that that's really just part of the excitement for the job? I mean, for example, working in an office, you might say, okay, I get in the office at 9 a.m., I do my emails from 9 till 10:30 a.m., then I tackle a specific topic from 10:30 till lunch, et cetera, et cetera. But, what you're talking about is a lot of it happens, outside of work hours. It could be as simple as a Facebook message to a PR person, them asking where their review's at, or it could be you staying up late to, take a look at a product that's being launched live and streamed.
Yeah, so, I have a certain amount of structure to any kind of work day that I do. We have a structure of posts that go up on the site, so there's regular slots that need to be filled with, content, whether it's from the US or from Australia. Outside of that structure, it's all a bit up in the air. So, we have to react to breaking news as it happens. We have to publish a certain number of reviews every week, because there's, so many important technology products that come out, and on top of that, it's one large part of my job involves, traveling around the world to different technology events, so I'm I'll be at E3 in June. I'll be at IFA, which is a sort of home appliance and home entertainment gadgets conference in Berlin in September. I was at CES in January. Computex is coming up as well. There's so many different events that require travel, and reporting from different parts of the world that, you have to be very flexible on both sort of a monthly basis and a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, of course. And, speaking of traveling for these events, and while traveling can be, brilliant at first and maybe get a bit stale, what to you makes a decent work travel experience? Because it's obvious, like you said, you do have some people supporting you, but it is a lean team, and you have to keep the news churning over to keep the website going. So, and obviously while you're traveling, it's harder for you to create content on the road on a laptop. So for you personally, what makes a good business trip a good business trip?
So, I've taken a fair few business trips for work in my time. I find it very, it's almost mandatory, that you're working on the plane to the destination and, on the ground once you get there. Having the ability to sort of work slightly ahead, so what I mean is, if I'm at an event or I'm heading over to, a product launch or something like that, having, the lion's share of the information that's going to be revealed, having that under NDA or having early access to their products and things like that does make the process of reporting so much easier because, despite being on the road, I can't actually disconnect from my 9 to 5 job, there's still, and I'm able to offload, a significant amount of that to the team that I work with. But at the same time, there's a certain expectation of, running the site as per normal, despite the fact that you're on the other side of the world.
Yeah, and we've chatted between us personally a little bit before about the difference between, I guess, news and also publishing reviews and things like that too. I just wanted to touch on and get a bit of what you think about the balance. Maybe it's specific. Maybe the balance would be specific to Gizmodo, or maybe the balance would be more specific to how you like to run things, because I guess you're the editor at Gizmodo. But how would you explain, I guess, the experience and, the pressure of reviewing things compared to churning out day-to-day news and updates?
So it's a really interesting kind of compromise because, I come from a reviewing background. I got my first job in technology writing on the basis of the fact that I was doing tech support. I got hired at PC World magazine purely to do home entertainment reviews, and my role has obviously changed so much since then. And Gizmodo is a site that runs as much as anything else, it runs on its news coverage. It has a blog style format. We publish news on the could be every half an hour, could be every 15 minutes. Within the sort of the Australian workday. By volume, the vast majority of the content that goes up is news. But, by its very nature, news is a transitory thing. And, we have reviews and we have our longer feature pieces and comparisons and all of the work that requires slightly more effort and attention than breaking news does. Those are the kind of things that I certainly find the most value in writing for Giz. But again, finding the time to devote to those is difficult, especially when you've got that that breaking news or the daily news cycle hanging over your head.
Yeah, and I guess personally for me, doing a bit of writing with Tweaktown and analysing this as on the other side of the fence as the PR person that pushes those kind of announcements, but also the reviews towards journalists such as yourself, the day-to-day news and the updates, I guess, are really what provides you with the core audience. I believe it's what provides you with legitimacy, but it's also what provides you, I guess, with the bulk of the views to be able to bring in the money to pay the bills, right? If you take this out, for example, in a completely different aspect, one way that I like to analyze some of the car modification workshops that I work with, for them, servicing cars is their bread and butter. That's how they pay their rent. That's how they pay their wages. But then they're able to use that extra time, which you could say call reviews, as your investment money. The reviews are things that might bring in Gizmodo a lot of views, especially if, say, it's an iPhone launch or something like that. But it's really the news, aka the servicing of cars, that bring in the Google ads and help your advertisement team kind of sell the spots. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so it's sort of a mix between one high traffic article versus 10 relatively low traffic articles. They might end up adding up to roughly the same amount of page views, but it's all about how much time you're spending on that review. For example, our two largest reviews of the year are inevitably the iPhone of that year and the Samsung Galaxy flagship phone of that year. But the time and effort involved in even just the writing of those reviews, even just the writing of those reviews, and not just the the actual heading along to an event that might be on the other side of the world, reporting the launch of that phone, the initial hands-on, the pricing, and then getting the hold of the review unit and putting the time and effort into mucking around with a gadget to be able to have the background knowledge and have the expertise to write that review. The amount of time that's invested, far outweighs, the time and effort that goes into writing, say, 10 news pieces that might get that same amount of traffic. But, having those reviews on the site and having, the expert voice that goes into writing those reviews, those are the kind of things that we find, really builds the reputation of the site.
Yeah, and what would you say is your personal expertise? You've mentioned things about iPhone and Android before, and you seem to talk quite a lot on social media about things like Tesla and things like that. So is there something specific that's your passion that you like to push through to your work, and is there anything that you'd possibly like to write a little bit more about as well?
Well, I would say my passion and the thing that I would like to write more about is exactly the same thing. And you mentioned it before, it's electric cars. I think Australia is at such an interesting point where, electrification is about to take off in a massive way. And, it's something that is sort of happening quietly in the background. And it's almost underreported, I'd say. And that's because, having the time and effort to devote to that, as well as everything else, is difficult. Gizmodo is a site that writes about absolutely everything from iPhones to cars. We're one of the few technology sites in Australia that writes about cars. But having the wide remit that we do means that we can only devote a certain amount of attention to each of those categories. And finding the time to write more about electric cars, for example, is something that I very much want to do, but it's a constant struggle.
Yeah, and I mean, and going back to that quickly, that question was actually from @HeoSat on Twitter, and just another question asked on Twitter as well, which I guess touches on the overarching topic that we're chatting about right now in regards to reviews. Is there anything personally that you've reviewed that has since become part of your day-to-day life? Is there any specific products in, the past 13 years of you or 10 years of you working in technology that's really stuck out for you?
It's so, I have a huge amount of technology that comes across my desk on a weekly basis. I was sick for a couple of days this week and ducked back into the office to pick up some bits and pieces over the long weekend, and found, a desk literally full of deliveries of new products, which is a great problem to have. But it kind of highlights the fact that there's so much happening, in the technology scene, that it's hard to spend any huge amount of time with one thing. I might be, using a phone for a couple of weeks to build enough of a background picture of it to review it, without just playing with it for a couple of seconds. That's kind of dishonest, and it's not the kind of thing our readers expect. But despite that, at the end of that 2 weeks, there's a new phone out, and that means, I'll need to, put this phone down that I may have really enjoyed using and move on to something that's not nearly as fun, or not nearly as, high tech or interesting or innovative.
You're like a technology lab rat or guinea pig, right?
Well, pretty much. I get the opportunity, and it's a great opportunity to have. I get the opportunity to use, basically, let's say every flagship Android phone that comes out in a year. I'll get the chance to muck around with it at one point or another, and it's fascinating because it gives you, that kind of background knowledge and that experience with these gadgets. But at the same time, it's such a transitory thing. We'll have a phone in our office for a month, and it goes back to the PR company or the manufacturer, and we move on to the next one. So I guess in answer to the question that was asked, there's very few technology products that actually one, have the ability to hang on to, because but more often than not it goes back to the manufacturer at the end of our review time with it. But at the same time, I'm lucky enough to have such a constant stream of bits and pieces coming across my desk that before I get bored with something, I get the chance to move on to the next. There are a few things, I guess, that have stuck around in my day-to-day life. The first OLED TV review that I reviewed, I now actually have sitting in my house, in my bedroom, big 55-inch OLED TV. And that, OLED is one of those technologies that when, you see it, you go, wow, this is a big difference to, LCD or even to plasma in the last couple of years. And there's, of the masses of technology that I get a chance to muck around with, there's only a very small amount that sticks around.
Yeah, and that one also, actually, I forgot to mention, was a question from @Gritfish on Twitter as well. So, for those people who are listening through to this podcast and would like to put in some of their own questions for anyone we chat to in the future, that is @Business in Games on Twitter. But self-promotion aside, getting back to, I guess, the beginning of, you were saying you moved from freelance into a full-time wage job, and @Cecilia Lynn on Twitter wanted to ask a question too, and thankfully I've not had to do much work because you seem to be quite popular on Twitter. But she wanted to know about entry pathways into technology journalism, and specifically in regards to internships, because we chatted about freelance versus wage. A couple of episodes ago I had a chat to Tech City, who's a YouTuber who's, kind of made his own way in technology. So there's obviously quite a lot of different jobs you can do. So is there a clear-cut path you could try to tell someone to get into this industry, or are there any specific pointers?
There are so many different ways that you can actually get into tech journalism and technology writing. Even saying that, I come to it from a writing perspective. Becoming a YouTuber, for example, is becoming more and more popular for people to try out and see whether they stick, whether it's something that they can enjoy doing and they can get followers and, eventually make a living wage out of. In terms of technology journalism, in the traditional sense, the pen and paper writing, or keyboard style, writing, I guess. An internship, I think, is incredibly valuable because it gives you that kind of newsroom experience, I guess, it gives you the ability to sit down with a bunch of other journos that have done the same job for, maybe years and decades before that, and get that kind of experience of understanding how they work and, the way they pick their stories that they write and things like that. With that said, there's a reason that we don't offer internships at Gizmodo, and that's because I personally believe that you should be paid for the work that you do, and we don't have a budget allocated to paid interns. So I prefer to put all of my my wages towards full-time writers, for example. So having an internship is incredibly valuable, but at the same time, getting a hold of one at a company that's relevant to the industry that you want to get in is difficult. It's a fantastic pathway, but at the same time, it's almost more tempting, I would say, to jump straight into freelancing and start writing stories that you think need to be written and doing the pieces of content that you feel comfortable doing or that you enjoy doing, and then shopping those out to websites that may be able to to buy them off you.
Yeah, and I mean, touching on the intern part, is that something that you and I would definitely agree strongly with? I mean, my previous job at Thermaltake and TDE Sports, I pushed two interns into the company through that, and Jeremy and Jono, and they've actually taken over now that I'm not at Thermaltake for the last couple of years. And I think for them, hopefully I was able to teach them a bit after a few years of experience, and for them, it's obviously landed them a job and some real world kind of experience to do some things. And once again, it's the same, it's the paid internship. Obviously, you're not going to expect a lot of money necessarily in internship, but it's more than zero, and it's more than, I guess, in quotation marks, what they call giving you exposure for, getting some writing. But, as far as exposure goes, I guess it's not always so bad, because you chat a little bit about, whether you should just start writing your own stories and pitching them out there. I do know that some companies do offer a 50-50 split with advertising, for example. So you can write an article for them. You have no pressure to or to not write. And if you publish it on there, they'll split the, Google ad revenue 50-50 with you. And like you said, Cam, there's just so many different options to jump in. But you did mention that it's quite hard to get a foothold into this kind of industry. And I guess this is a question that I've asked everyone who's come on so far and everyone in the future. Would you say that it's almost too late to start being a technology writer, or is it never too late?
Look, I think of, the way that my job has evolved in the last decade. I got a job at PC World magazine, and, the entirety of my 9 to 5, and it was a 9 to 5, for example, the entirety of my 9 to 5 was writing, words into a Microsoft Word document and then sending that Microsoft Word document to someone else. That sub-editor chose a headline, that sub-editor chose an image and published it on the website in the first place. My job now involves publishing directly to the website. My job involves taking photo, making videos, doing social, attending events. There's a huge amount of difference in the job that I did 10 years ago and the job that I do now. And because of that, I think you're expected to have, a different set of abilities to what you might have 10 years ago. I think that does make it more difficult, but at the same time, over those last 10 years, we've seen, YouTube become incredibly popular, for example. So there's different avenues to getting into, the technology scene more broadly. I think it's not unreasonable to say that getting into technology writing and technology journalism, or games journalism as well, has become more difficult from that traditional, do a university degree and move on into a graduate level job. That has become more difficult, but also, there's alternatives that exist now that didn't exist for me when I was starting.
Yeah, and talking about YouTube that you brought up, do you I guess for me personally, I would classify Gizmodo as more of a consumer tech compared to, say, Tweaktown, who will be talking to their head editor in episode 004, who's more of a, I guess, enthusiast tech, and some of the YouTube enthusiast techs as well. Would you consider for Gizmodo picking up some kind of full-time video editors? And do you think that that's a space that a lot of the consumer tech websites will be moving further into?
Yeah, so we've actually got plans to, always do more and more video as we move throughout the year and the year after this. It's something that is becoming expected. It can boil down to something as simple as, the ads that appear in video, are more profitable than the ads that appear on the website. So there's so many different things to consider, in that kind of transition. I think it's one of those things that obviously has evolved even since I've been writing, and is going to continue to evolve, as I continue and, after my time. I think video is obviously going to become more and more important, even on those, on sites like Gizmodo that have that kind of, they are sites that are predominantly, text-based.
Mm.
Oh, you there? You cut out for a second.
Yep.
All right, sweet. I think my mic might have gone a bit silly, but yeah, no, I
right.
Just finished up what I was saying, I think it's going to become more important in, as the years go on.
Yeah, for sure. And, touching on, you were talking a little bit about the advertising and the difference between websites and YouTube and things like that. Could you explain to the people listening how Gizmodo works in terms of advertising and writing an editorial? Is there a difference? Are you covering the whole lot, A and B, or is there a separation between the two?
Yeah, so we are, I consider us absolutely lucky in that we have, an absolute firewall that exists between, our advertising sales team and our editorial team. So, I have a very broad understanding of how, the advertising side works. Working as an editor, I interact with the sales team, and, I act as a liaison in that way between, the kind of things that our sales team might sell and, the editorial side of things. But we have, complete autonomy, over what we write. For example, we decide the stories that we cover and the topics that we pay attention to. Gizmodo is a site that runs predominantly on, banner advertising, and that's been something that has, sort of formed the backbone of the web and journalism on the web. So it's not a new thing. It's a time old part of the internet. As well as that, we take part in, one thing that's sort of becoming more and more popular on the internet, which is content. So we have a commercial editor that works, sort of again as a liaison between the sales team and the editorial side of things. So our commercial editor, Tegan, works on, it might be the deals posts that go up on Gizmodo and our sister sites over the course of a day, or there may be some sponsored series that that the sales team may be collaborating with technology companies on. She will be taking care of those because that provides that firewall between our editorial independence and what the sales team is doing to make money for the sites.
Yeah, and I guess it's a good segue from that firewall into the more PR side of things, which is where I'm working currently. We've seen that globally, I guess a lot of press and journalists have ended up moving over from the press side to the PR side. Take, for example, Matthew Wu, who a lot of the techies know quite well in Australia. A guy from Sydney who's now in Melbourne working for M&C Partners, doing promo for a lot of startups and Catch of the Day. He was at and previously he was at ASUS and Edelman, and he was writing freelance for a while. You have examples of myself working at Tweaktown while I was in university, now come over to what we joke as the dark side, working for PR and Corsair. And even the global PR guy from Corsair, Harry Butler, he came over from some of the print mags too. Do you find yourself entertaining that idea to move over into PR from journalism? Does the freedom, I guess, of writing ever get old? Do you think about going to, say, you could almost say a more stable job, but not necessarily, I guess, just the other side of the fence?
Yeah, look, I'm very comfortable in the job that I have now. I feel like I've been very lucky to sort of move up within the Australian technology journalism scene to one of the jobs that I consider, as the pinnacle of it. So I'm very happy with the job that I have now. I get the ability to muck around with technology and on an absolutely changing basis every single day. Every single day is entirely different to the one before it. I think if I was to move out of journalism but stay within the technology industry, I think the thing that would have to draw me across would be some kind of evangelism role. So it would be a role still talking about technology, but working at a company that I personally am a fan of, that I enjoy the products of, or that I think they're doing something important in the world. I think that's probably the only thing that I would consider outside of journalism rather than the PR side of things.
Yeah, and talking about the quality of products and the quality of company, being a technology reviewer at heart, and that's what I like to do my writing across the most of as well. I wanted to have a bit of a discussion that we've talked about a little bit previously, which is how a great product will really change your outlook on the day and the outlook on products. It's nothing new to us that lots of products will come across our desk and you'll be pitched 1 billion Bluetooth speakers a day from random Amazon companies looking to make some affiliate link money. And, there's no doubt that you've always got 8 phones at any one time that are trying to get into your hands. But what's it like when that one product comes along that really just blows you away and really kind of reinvigorates what you want to write about?
So, you're right in saying that there's a huge amount of products. And what that really means is that when there's that one that stands out, it stands out so much more significantly because, you have so many technology products that are released. Let's take, Android phones, for example. There's, dozens released every single year, and they can very much be very samey. They follow the same trends. They have roughly the same specs. But it means that when there's, a new flagship launch or a new, upstart company that comes out of nowhere and says, hey, we've got this really interesting concept. Let's see how we can, prosecute that, how we can take that to the masses. When those things happen, and it's, you could almost call it the Tesla effect, a company that has, in the past few years, in the past decade, really come out of nowhere and come out of being, a bold claim, basically, and delivering on those promises. And, Tesla is now, I think, the highest market value automaker in the US as a result, beating out companies that have, hundreds of years of manufacturing. And it comes from that, it comes from them having that, unconventional promise or that unconventional claim to fame, those big promises that they make. When they actually deliver on them, rather than just making those promises, those are the times that that they really stand out. And because there's so many products that come out with those promises and don't deliver on them, it's when you see those promises, when you see those things actually become real, things like Google Assistant, for example, a voice assistant that actually, you can talk to in relatively natural language and you can ask questions and receive responses and give contextual feedback to, have an actual conversation with. When those things work, when they're promised to work and then when they do work as you want them to, that's, it's really gratifying because, it's a little bit of that kind of, I feel like I'm living in the future. It's one of those few instances where you go, oh, this has actually worked as promised and it's really cool.
And I guess it really comes back to believing in the product, and that's something that you always want to do. And, touching on how you said that if you went to the PR side of things, you'd really want to work for a company you believed in and you thought had good products. And, that's something that I did with Corsair, for example. For those who know me more personally, I stopped working at university and stopped working at Tweaktown and running my own projects to take up this kind of job. And for someone who has, for me, maybe 6 years and for you, 10 to 13 years experience in the industry, it's not something that comes across lightly. And, it's nothing new to me to release a new mechanical keyboard with some better RGB lighting or, slightly advanced cherry keys and all that kind of stuff. And while that's interesting to me as I'm an enthusiast, it's when those products come out that are truly exciting. For example, say the Corsair One, which you guys have reviewed recently, or Alex has reviewed on Gizmodo, that really kind of, I guess, reinvigorates what the work that you're doing, and you sit back and think, holy crap, I've got, it's anywhere between 1 and 3 Corsair One sitting in my room testing and playing games with, and this is a product that I'll really enjoy and will pay money for. I'm getting to play with it for free.
Yeah, so it's rare, but when it does happen, and I was actually talking to off Mike about this and talking to Alex about it previously. The Corsair One is one of those things one of those products, and they're so rare where you see them and you experience them and you're just like, oh, this is something that's genuinely slightly new. This is a concept that's been brought to market and prosecuted well, and it delivers on the things that it promises to. It's quite rare, but when it does happen, it's gratifying.
Welcome to the future. That's what you said. So speaking of Tesla, it's nothing new. I've used that. That's the first time I've ever used "it's nothing new," and I've said it like 4 times today. But for anyone who follows you on Twitter and around the house and watches you sleep, it's obvious that you're a fan of Tesla, and you've spoken quite fondly about some of the things they've released, and they've obviously got some big plans in the future. And I know that we've chatted about this, but officially on air, what would be a couple of your favorite products that you have reviewed of all time?
Well, you know what? You give me a really good segue there to talk about the Tesla Model S. When that was launched into Australia a couple of years ago at the end of that year, it was, I think I opened my review by saying, this is the most incredible car that I've ever driven, because it was, such a quantum leap in driving from the car, or cars that I'd driven before that. It's one of those sort of things that you realize after the fact is a bit of a stepping stone on the way to sort of a new generation of technology. Outside of the Model S, and some of the other things that Tesla's done over the previous couple of years, being a company that makes those kind of bold gambles. The one thing that kind of stands out to me as, again, one of those kind of moments in time is when I got the opportunity to go to Zero Latency, which is a warehouse scale virtual reality space down in North Melbourne. Got the chance to go and visit those guys when it was, literally just 5 guys working out of what was otherwise a very empty warehouse, filled with VR tracking gear. They delivered very much on their promise of, this is an entirely wireless warehouse scale virtual reality space, and talking to them in the 18 months or almost 2 years now since they've launched, and seeing them go from, a company with a warehouse space in North Melbourne to a company, with, a similar kind of, virtual reality spaces opening up in North America, in Japan, in South America, having been valued significantly and invested in by huge companies. Seeing that develop, seeing, that company especially go from small to, start making waves around the world, it's rare to be a part of that from the start, which I think probably makes it a little more significant. It also helps that, they're Australian. They've been doing some really cool things on the world stage, from their little North Melbourne warehouse. But I would say, Zero Latency is one of those things that really stands out as a really sort of special moment in time.
Yeah, and chatting about, the good and the bad stuff. This is actually a question from James Anderson on Facebook through the Oceania Business and Esports Facebook group. He wanted to know, what are some of the more challenging aspects in your field? Because it's we chat a lot in business and games about, I guess the good parts and the bad parts. And being business in games, I really like to touch on what are the obstacles that you have to overcome to, do your day-to-day or to be successful in your field. So how would you address that question?
I feel like I've got the fundamentals of technology journalism down pat pretty well in the last 10 years. delivering content, writing a story, for example, or finding the right image, or writing the good, an appropriate headline, or having a good relationship with, the people that I need to talk to, the experts and the companies that make my job possible. The main thing for me that I find as a challenge is just staying up to date, is being educated on the topics that I cover, and that's something that I think I would probably find really difficult if I wasn't an enthusiast outside of, my 9-to-5 job. I get on the train at the end of the day to head home, and I'll jump on Reddit's r/technology subreddit because I like reading about the things that I write about. I'm lucky in that my job is one of the things that I really enjoy. But at the same time, because everything is technology, because there's so many different facets to what I write about, and because Gizmodo is a site that writes about a huge range of technology and the way that it affects consumers, everyday people, being up to date on as much as I can, or being expert within the specific topics that I want to cover on an ongoing basis, or for an upcoming feature or something that I'm doing, being able to devote the time to educate myself on those things, that's probably the biggest obstacle that I encounter by far, is finding the free time to educate myself on the things that that are increasingly important.
Yeah, and at James Croft messaged in as well to the at Business and Games Twitter, and he mentioned about what we chatted about before, about how tech is 24/7. Does that personally for you make it hard for you to relax, hard to switch off?
Yeah, look, I give myself my weekends, we were talking about hiking before, I give myself my weekends very much switched off. I disconnect almost entirely from the website and from my email and, from Twitter. These are the things that I use to keep myself up to date as much as anything else. Disconnecting from those on the weekend means that I can, throw myself into it, from early Monday morning to late Friday evening. If I was switched on with it 24/7, I think I would have burnt out long ago. I think I found the reasonable compromise between being switched on and switched off. It does become difficult to relax, especially when there's a significant amount of overseas travel, or it's a particularly busy period. The couple of weeks around CES, or the couple of weeks around E3, for example. They're manic as a journalist. With the amount of news that's coming out and the amount of sort of contact that you have, even if it's just the amount of emails that you have to get through on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, having that ability to disconnect, even if it's just for a single day or for a couple of days, gives me the ability to recharge and come back into it refreshed.
Yeah, sure. So finally, is there anyone special that you'd like to give a bit of a shout out to? And for anyone who's wanting to follow some of your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can always follow us on at Gizmodo AU on Twitter. That's where we publish a constant stream of all the stories that go up on the site, and obviously gizmodo.com.au is the website that we run. And you can always jump on there into the comments section and give us some feedback on an article, or let us know how we're doing. There's one person that I'd like to give a shout out to, and that's Ray Johnston. She's at Ray Johnston on Twitter. Not that she needs it, because she's got probably about twice as many followers as I do. But she's my offsider. She's my news journalist, and she publishes, the vast majority of the Australian content that goes up on Giz. So I think that gives her, like I was saying before, that gives her, this amazing perspective on, so many different aspects of technology in Australia. That, I would say, go and ask her a question, go and ask her opinions on the things that are, happening within the Australian tech scene, because, she's absolutely expert.
Yeah, she's definitely crazy connected, and she knows a lot. She knows a lot about everything. I guess is the
that is 100% true. She's expert on many matters.
All right, thanks for joining us today, Cam, and thank you to everybody else for listening into episode 003 of the Business and Games podcast. Who would you like us to chat to in the future? You can let us know at Business and Games on Twitter, and also facebook.com/Business and Games. You can also let us know what you think of my wonderful voice or any of our guests, or discuss the topics at the Oceania Esports and Business Gaming Group. You can follow Campbell on Twitter at @CSimpson, that's Simpson with a 0, or you can follow me at SmithyMayo or on Facebook.com/SmithyMayo. So once again, thank you very much for listening into the Business and Games podcast. I've been your host, Chris Mayer Smith, and bye for now.